Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Another great lineup. In the first hour, we're speaking with Philip Comella about the collapse of materialism. And in the second hour with Gabriel Roberts about the roots of spiritual belief. But Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, a problem at work, a problem in your relationship, you have some health concerns, need some direction to where to move forward, give me a call, drop me a line, send me an email, and we can set up a time for a private conversation in person, over the phone, and even via Skype. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. I'm just trying to think, as always, you can go out and purchase my new book, E.T. Chronicles, which has just been released. Go to your local bookseller or Amazon.com. Also, I have released Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients, that is available on Amazon Digital Downloads, and you can get your copy today. Sweet. One quick announcement. I am doing a psychic gallery in Gladewater, Texas. So if you're in the East Texas area, Longview, Tyler, Marshall, I don't know. I don't even know half the cities in this area yet. But anyway, I'll be there. I'll be, doing a gallery style session. Have not done one of those in well over 10 years. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So check it out. If you want more information, go to soulhealer.com and get that information. If you missed an episode of Just Energy Radio, you can always go to our website, www.justenergyradio.com. We have almost 8 years worth of archives posted on the site. Or you can go to our YouTube channel. That would be Just Energy Radio on YouTube, and check out the shows there. But it's on iTunes. It's all over the place. And you can come here to the Inception Radio Network and listen to the shows as well. If you go to the webpage, sign up for our newsletter. If you go to the YouTube page, please subscribe to let us know that you're there and supporting the show. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about our guest and bring him on the air. Philip Comella is a lawyer, visionary, futurist, and host of the popular radio show Conversations Beyond Science and Religion podcast at the webtalkradio.net. His book, The Collapse of Materialism, Visions of Science, Dreams of God, is a culmination of decades of work committed to developing a new and credible scientific paradigm to unify the physical world of science with the metaphysics of religion. He lives with his wife and daughter in Glen Ellen, Illinois. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, the author of The Collapse of Materialism, Philip Comella. Hey, Philip, how are you doing?
Great, Rita. It's good being here with you.
Well, thank you just so much for coming on. I was so excited to hear that you had a book come out. I remember being on your show and, thought you were a great interviewer. And I'm like, hey, he has a book. Need to have him come on. So that's always fun.
Yeah, I still remember the show we did, so I had a lot of fun with you too. So I appreciate your asking me to come on your show.
Well, I have to ask you, how did you get interested? And I'm going to kind of put this into an umbrella term, into alternative, I cannot speak tonight, alternative thought topics.
Well, I think it all comes out of viewing things from what I would call a mind first standpoint instead of a matter first standpoint. We often forget that about 200-300 years ago, there was a field of philosophy called idealism, which is mind first, that really was popular, that was gaining momentum. People like Berkeley, Kant, Hegel, some of the great thinkers of all time were idealists, mind first thinkers. And then Newton came along with his mechanical universe, and folks forgot all about this idealism or this idealistic approach to viewing the world. And everyone's gone down this materialistic or mechanical approach because the mathematical formulas were successful in describing the world. So I have a philosophy degree. I studied all this, and I decided that we could explain more if we go back to the mind-first approach. And indeed, I think that it offers a basis to explain a lot of things that are either ignored or written off or forgotten about in our current, materialistic standpoint. So it all comes from a basis in philosophy, which is this idealistic approach, mind-first approach.
I find it interesting that everybody brings their piece to the table, and everybody has different things that interest them that they dig into and then share that information with everyone else that, I don't have to go and do all the digging that you did. And, with my material, you don't have to go and do the digging that I did, but you reap the benefits of, that commitment to research.
Right. I think there's a great thing going on, with the internet and the sort of freedom to blog. I think that more people are expressing themselves, are expressing their ideas. And I think that the publishing world has opened up a lot with self-publishing and different electronic means to get the word out there. And I think it's led to a lot of new ideas, a lot of creativity. And I think it's really encouraging, and I agree with you that there's so many people, that I've had on my show and books that I've read, where there's a lot of bright people out there that are being heard now, and I hope that this process of science and evolution that the best ideas do survive in the end, and I think that's so it's encouraging that more people are contributing their opinions and viewpoints. And sharing these ideas, and there's quite a culture building in this, Rita. I think this alternate way of viewing things, and I think it's very healthy.
Well, and it also makes it with things like Create Space and ebooks and YouTube and all of these vehicles to put information out. There's not the level of, and I'm going to say, censorship or preferential viewpoints that are being put out and disseminated. And so there's all kinds of different, and I'm going to use, one of your terms, worldviews that are being challenged and questioned right now.
Right, exactly. And I think that, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and it's sort of like who's controlling the airwaves, and still the standard orthodox materialistic viewpoint is controlling the airwaves. They are controlling the big tent. For example, the show The Cosmos with Neil deGrasse, that was giving one side of the picture. But I want to be part of the group that chips away at that breaks down this materialistic or this locked-in mindset that we're in, and opens up the field so that we could start being more creative and really start experiencing what I think is the full potential that we have. Whether it's energy creatures, whether it's spiritual beings. I mean, there's a lot of us that is inside that wants to get out, and I think that this freedom that we're seeing in the publishing world, in the internet, in the blogosphere, is exposing people to these new ideas. And I hope that we come to a standpoint where we could agree upon something that is more universally beneficial than some of the ideas that are currently being put forward by the leaders of science. One of my bugaboos, and I'm writing an article about it right now, is that science itself is very pessimistic. They don't believe there's any future for us. They think they're like doomsayers. They think the sun's going to run out of fuel, that the universe has no answer. I mean, in the recent issue of Time magazine, there's an article about how the universe doesn't care for you. It's a very negative worldview we're in, and people just don't understand that. Why buy into something so negative when there's a lot more potential that we could be exploiting? Let's open our minds to something new. So it's a really good period I think we're in right now, Rita.
I agree, especially in that way, because they can't keep. I mean, you were talking about a show on TV, and there are so many shows that they have on the airwaves, like on Discovery Channel or History Channel,
right.
And I laugh through half of them because they're just putting out the same old standard junk that
right.
people know, or more and more people realize isn't even true.
Right. It really is amazing when you actually get into some of the theories, and that's what I try to do in The Collapse of Materialism, is when you really look under the covers of what some of these theories are, they really don't make any sense. Like the inflationary Big Bang or the multiverse. There's some of these theories that are treated as orthodox. They're in college textbooks, but no one's questioning them because they think that they're written in stone. And I think if anything else, we need to have an alternative way of looking at things, subjected to the same standards as any other scientific theory. Look at its logic, look at the evidence, and see if it passes muster. I mean, we know, for example, of all the great research on the paranormal that people like Dean Radin, is doing, and epigenetics, mind over matter. There's so much research being done on alternate ways of thinking, the power of thought, the power of belief. And this stuff needs to be brought out and shown that it is just as credible, if not more credible, than many of the scientific theories that we've bought into. So it really is, I hope, a revolutionary era we're going to be moving into. And I don't want to overstate it, but I think that it's very important that we move in that direction, because it's clear to me, at least, that the current paradigm or worldview isn't cutting it anymore.
Well, and let's start there, because your book really delves into the basis of reality and the common beliefs that are held by people and our current worldview. So when we look out based on the reigning principles, what do we see and how do we perceive it?
Well, I think that there is an assumption that when we look out at the world, and let's take a tree, the sky, the planets, the stars. When we look out at the world, we assume that the physical world, including our own bodies, exists outside of what we are, outside of our minds and outside of our spirits. We view it as a self-operating machine. Now, I'm not saying that everybody takes this perspective, but this is the perspective of Newton, and this is the perspective of modern science. The best example probably being the fact that we think our bodies sort of age and grow old on their own, that we have no power over our bodies, that they get sick on their own power. And the same thing for Mother Nature, that we have no power over the world, that it's independent of us. It's like a self-operating machine. So that's the materialistic worldview that we're currently in. But we know, however, and this is why there's an inherent contradiction in this perspective. We know, as countless people have said through quantum theory, for example, that the world does not exist of machine parts. That's the whole point of quantum theory, that the world does not consist of things. Heisenberg famously said that atoms are not things. You read any of the hundreds of books on quantum theory, they all say the same thing. There is no thing out there. There's energy. There's wave packets. So there is no machine out there. And then when you look at ourselves, it's like, well, aren't we made of the same things? Doesn't that mean that we're energy, spirits? And isn't there therefore just one field of energy? And when you start going in that direction, things get really exciting. And so this is why I think things are breaking down, because this mechanical perspective that we're sort of raised with is doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that this harmonious, mathematically ordered mechanical contraption would come from nothing on its own power and form itself into the world we see. It to me, it doesn't make any sense. I could be crazy, and there's a decent chance of that, but I just don't think it makes any sense. You know, as I tell people, I could be crazy, but I'm crazy in a good way. And I go back to the Niels Bohr once said, he criticized another theorist by saying your theory is crazy, but not crazy enough to be true. So I do think we need to get out of the box and look at things differently, and that's what I'm advocating. I'm advocating take that down, hit the pause button for a moment, and imagine mind came first, not matter, and see if you could start explaining things better. And my conclusion is you could explain not things better, but you could explain everything. And that should mean something if we're trying to find a scientific theory.
But
So
what about
radical.
the whole Big Bang theory, Darwin theory of evolution, all of that? Does that just get all thrown out?
Yeah. I think the Big Bang doesn't make any sense. And this is, you see, there's two levels to this. First of all, it's whoever independently evaluated whether the Big Bang really makes any sense. I mean, most of us think that in order to be civilized, you have to believe in the Big Bang and Darwin. It's part of being a civilized human being. But ironically, I saw a statistic recently where like 50% of the American public doesn't believe in the Big Bang, believe it or not, and something like the same percentage believes more in the Book of Genesis creation than Darwin. So the problem, the problem with the Big Bang, and I'll be brief on this because I could elaborate. The problem with the Big Bang is that to me it's a myth. It's a creation myth. It sounds scientific, but it's no different than the other creation myths that we've learned about through time. Because scientists to me have done an amazing job of ignoring the big question that we always asked when we were kids, which is, where did all this stuff come from? They just ignore the question. To me, unless you can answer that question, then don't talk to me anymore. Explain how this stuff came from nothing. And then, okay, after that, explain to me how it managed to get itself organized so that we see a mathematically organized world out there. And that's not even including the inflationary Big Bang, which is really the leading model right now. In the inflationary Big Bang, you have to imagine that the universe inflated by 10 to the 40th power, 10 to the 40th times in 10 to the minus 30 seconds. Which is mind-blowing to imagine it happen. And the reason why scientists came up with this is because it explains why the universe is so balanced. In other words, the universe is balanced, which indicates fine-tuning, which indicates design, but they don't want to attribute the order to a designer. Therefore, they manipulated the formulas with the inflationary Big Bang, and that's the theory they're going with. Now, what I just said, I don't know if it sounds radical or not, but that is the scientific orthodoxy. If you pick up any science textbook from college, that's what they say. That's what the textbooks say. So I don't think it makes any sense, but it could just be me.
Well, are you still doing your show?
Yep.
Okay, so I am going to recommend a guest for you. And I had him on a few weeks ago, Rick Delano. Have you interviewed him?
No.
He has a movie called The Principal. You need to watch the movie. You need to have this guy on the show because I could just see the two of you. Because I think the two of you will be a great fit because he talks about the microwave background and this pattern that they found that isn't supposed to be there. And it was really fascinating, although at times a little bit over my head. But
yeah. No. I will look. I will look him up. But to me, the point I want to make here is that ultimately, the truth survives. The truth remains standing. And so you come up with a theory, and it's tested by experience. It's tested by logic. And so, if the Big Bang is the creation theory that is the truth, it will survive. I happen to think it's hogwash, and for the reasons that I've summarized and that are in my book, it doesn't make any sense. But perhaps it will survive scrutiny and be found to be the final truth. I just think that when you think it through, it doesn't make any sense. Furthermore, it leads to me to a world without purpose, to a world without direction. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is from Stephen Hawking, who said something like, "We're just chemical scum," and those are his words. "We're just chemical scum on some tiny little planet in a random universe." See, I have a little higher views of the universe than he does. But that's what happens when you buy in lock, stock, and barrel to the Big Bang. But it's a very interesting topic, and it's a kind of thing where I say, number one, question what people tell you. That's all. Question. If you question and you're happy with the answers, fine. At least question them, and question what I'm saying, of course. But think about them and think through them. Don't believe things because you're told them. And so that's really where I'm at.
I think that's going to be like our whole show tonight is, stepping out of the box. But how did we get stuck in such a material world? Personally, I'm convinced that our ancestors had a clear understanding of a world filled with vibration and quantum fields and subtle energy. So how did we lose all of that?
Well, my best guess on that one comes from Newton, where he used formulas to describe the physical world, and science since his time has marveled over the fact that they could describe the physical world using mathematical formulas. So it's like a scientific experiment. Okay, it's really cool to be able to come up with these formulas to describe the workings of the physical world. But the other thing, Rita, that I think is very, very important, and this sort of goes into Darwin, is that scientists want to figure it out themselves. They don't want to give in to the creationists, to the literalists of the Bible, who look to God to explain everything. So a lot of what materialism is, I think, is a reaction, and I think it's an overreaction to religious interpretations of reality. And so I think that's, to me, if you read Richard Dawkins, for example, he will do everything possible not to get caught into a God explanation or a creationistic explanation, because that's evil. That's a taboo. So I think we've gone too far in the other direction. We've run away from our spiritual essence in trying to be scientific. And what I say is, at the end of the rainbow, at the end of the scientific explanation, you find out that you are explaining a world that you participated in creating. It becomes a self-portrait, And that's really what I'm saying. I'm saying at the end of the scientific enterprise, we realize that we are the creators, and that's that's where I think things are heading.
And so what you're saying is that, because I think a lot of people get hung up with the word God, just
right,
because of what their preconceived notion is. But to some people like myself, we are God. Everything in the universe, whatever word you want to use out there, is God, and we're all parts of it. So from the perspective that you're talking about, are we kind of coming at it from we are part of this larger thing versus there's some guy with white hair and a flowy robe, throwing lightning bolts at people?
Right. And I think that in order to have and I'm going to use the word scientific discussion on this, I don't think we should lapse into labels, because you're right. Terms like God carry a lot of baggage. Everyone would have a different impression of what that term means. So I like trying to explain things without using those meaning-laden terms, and seeing if we could then explain them at the end of the theory. So I think the most neutral thing I would say is I would call it internal energy, or the inner and the outer. So I think that we are part of one mind, one spirit, one underlying unity, which is exactly what Hinduism and many of the Eastern religions say, and also what Western idealists would say, that we are actually one consciousness, and that we have separated ourselves into separate beings in order to have company. And this is the one and the many. It's similar to the Tower of Babel. It's the classic issue of the one and the many. We have separated ourselves in order to have companionship, but at the end of the day, the idea is to join together in physical form that which is united in spiritual form. That is the great quest, in my mind, of humankind. And that happens to be the quest, I think, of most of the world's religions. I just put it in different words, but the notion of heaven on earth is exactly what I'm talking about, because it translates in the real world into peace on earth. And I go all the way. I mean, I spent 40 years writing my book, so I want to make sure I put it all down and went all the way. And so what I say is that if we treat this underlying principle that we are all one, if we realize that we are God in disguise, or spirit, or one spirit in disguise, and we incorporate that into our lives and into our learning with the same force as things like the law of gravity, or the same truth as the law of gravity or the law of electromagnetism, just imagine the world we can build. That's sort of where I'm at. Right now, we have these conversations and we think this stuff is, either new age quackery, or it's on the outskirts, it's out of the box. But if we start bringing it in to our textbooks and the way we treat each other, just imagine the world that we can build. So I am a romantic. I am an idealist. But as they say, you got to dream big. So that's what I'm about.
Well, I mean, I remember that growing up, that the theory of evolution was, kind of taboo at that point in time. And it took a lot of work and energy to even get that into educational materials.
Yeah.
And, so for us to change the paradigm about our place in the universe, it needs to happen. I mean, with all the information that's coming out from, quantum theory and some of the other sciences, our understanding of our history, which is, my big area, things are not what we've been told.
Right. And it's very similar to Darwinism. Now, I happen to think Darwin was wrong. That's another topic. And of course, I didn't set out to prove him wrong. I just don't think his explanation is complete or adequate. But there's so much going on right now that is chipping away at this old paradigm. I mean, example is Robert Lanza, the stem cell guy who was named one of Time Magazine's most influential people, I think, of 2013. His book called Biocentrism is pretty close to my ideas. He says that consciousness is really the source, and that the world revolves around human consciousness, and we have to get over it and start realizing that. Now, this guy is mainstream. And so this is where I'm going with this, is that, 20 years ago, I was really on the outskirts. I'm still sort of on the outskirts, but I'm not as much on the outskirts as it appears to be. There's more and more people sort of going in this direction, and this, I think, is how paradigms change. And this is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a real revolution, a revolution that's going to have real effect. Because, optimistically, we are going to start devoting more time to the human spirit instead of bombs and machines and death traps and mines. We're going to be spending more time on what really matters or what joins us together than what separates us. When you think about it, we really live in a culture of fear. I mean, I'm not big on,
and that just is getting worse and worse and worse. The last, 20 years have been awful. Since 9/11, it's been really bad.
Right. And it gets worse and worse. I mean, it's like the media, or at least some parts of the media, pick up the most negative thing and spread it around. Ebola is a good example. Okay, if you look at the amount of fear that's spread around versus the actual cases, it is wildly out of proportion. There was an article in the Chicago Tribune. It wasn't about Ebola spreading. The title was "Fear of Ebola Spreading." Well, that tells it all right there. It's a culture of fear. We fear diseases, we fear our neighbors, and of course we fear other religions, and we fear other countries. And I think that this is all part of us being separate from each other, honoring the individual, our own ideas, our own clan, our own picture of God, our own place of worship, more than a united or a common goal. It's all related to materialism. These are some of the after effects. And I don't want to dump everything on materialism, but a lot of it is connected to this idea that we are separate beings with separate bodies, separate gods, and that we're on our own trip as opposed to on a common voyage. So there's a lot of work to do, but if we set out in the right path and have this clear goal, and start rewriting some textbooks, start opening universities to more ideas, start getting a more diverse selection of ideas on TV and the media, like this show, like my show, I think that we're going to gradually see the walls of materialism come crumbling down. So,
but with that materialism, with coming into listening to ourselves and interacting with each other on this higher level of existence, I mean, that really requires change to individuals, change to how we interact with each other. And, it's going to be interesting because there are so many people that are so adverse to change. They might change their mind about what they think about something or become more open to what they think about something. But then some of this would require that they'd have to make like personal changes, like recycle or get rid of some of this big business, GMO crap that they're shoving down our throats. It's big because it's not even totally on a personal level. It's, even in corporations that change needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think this is where I think evolution plays a part. You see, I think that there's a spiritual evolution in addition to a material evolution. I think consciousness rises. I think spirituality or energy evolves over time. We get more mature. We become more conscious of who we are. And I don't mean anything real fancy. I think if I had to put it as simple as possible terms, I would say that we get more mature. We start understanding who we really are. And the one thing that is so true is that everybody has their own life to lead and their own choices to make. And if you can't convince somebody to change their mind, then that's it. That's the life they want to lead. If they want to lead a life where there's no hope, where they're happy with the orthodox science and religious standpoint, fine. But we have a big advantage, and that is we have young people, open minds, continuing to enter into our culture. And I think that is where the movement will succeed, because I view it as a stream where we're constantly introducing clean water, which is open minds, pure minds, into the stream. And it's diluting the contamination that we get over the time. This is the image in my mind. And I know that you can't, it's hard to change minds, particularly when you get older. It's so hard. But I think we have young people entering the world, and it's going to help. And number two, Rita, a lot of people are followers. I hate this, and if Oprah changes, if we have some leading scientists change, if we have the leaders change, then I think it's going to be a little different. See, I think so. I haven't figured that all out, frankly, but I'm optimistic that I'm optimistic that if the leadership, if the thought leaders start getting more in tune with this way of thinking, it will encourage more people to change their minds, and we won't have that resistance to change. Okay, so that's just one of my little theories on that one. But again, I'm optimistic that something's going to work.
Well, we can hope. So we have a question from the chat room from Canoe. And he says, would you agree that it is wrong to take major leaps of science based on no evidence, just faith? Or do you believe that science is like eating an elephant one bite at a time?
I missed the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to read it over again. Yeah, I mean, I'm reading and I'm going, huh? Would you agree that it is wrong to take major leaps in science based on no evidence and just faith? Or do you believe that science is like eating an elephant one bite at a time?
Well, I think what I would say about that one is that there is a relationship between religion and science. And I'm not sure if this is answering the question directly, but this is what I'm going to say. There is faith in both religion and science. In religion, you have faith in God, faith of a better world, faith in an afterlife, faith in mysterious things that really can't be proven, at least apparently. In science, there's faith that the universe came from nothing. There's faith that the world became ordered through some means that someday we'll figure out. There's faith that medical science will someday cure cancer and cure all ills. There's faith in both areas. And to me, the message of science is that we should always strive for a logical, rational explanation and look at the evidence and always value those explanations over things that are just based on faith. Occam's razor Occam's razor is one of the classic principles of science. It essentially says, the less assumptions you make in a theory, the better the theory. Newton said the same thing, which is a simple explanation should always be favored over a complicated one. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is because there's less you have to take on faith. The more you can explain with a simple theory, the better that theory is. And so I think scientists have sort of led us to believe that everything they know and talk about is all logical and well supported, but they have their own brand of faith, their own brand of beliefs, and they will, if you read the fine print in their books, they admit it. And if you go to my book, The Collapse of Materialism, I talk a lot about that. So it's an interesting topic. So that's my answer to that question.
So if we can use our mind to control, create the world, as you've been saying, how would that work? What is your thought on that?
Well, this is actually pretty simple, because I think that we create the world together. I think it's a united dream. I think the unconscious mind of man, of humankind, is dreaming of the world. So the public world stands in the same relation to the united mind as our night dreams stand in relation to the individual mind. Okay? Now, this is a necessary conclusion from thinking or taking the position of a mind-first world. Why do we see the same sky? Well, we see the same sky because we are participating in the same story, the same narrative. That's why. And so we can't change the world individually. We know that in moments of severe emotional distress, or severe love or care, that one person can lift a car to take it off their child, or jump an unheard of distance, or score 80 points in a basketball game. We know that one person in rare moments can achieve like a superhuman standpoint. But the real way to change the world for the better is that we've got to unite the mind. We've got to unite humankind for a common goal. And that's why I'm encouraging, that's why I think peace is the answer. It's always been the answer. So this is not something that is far out or bizarre. What I'm saying is that peace not only takes care of our relations among each other, but we eventually create a heaven on earth, because we are now joining together to create a better world. And I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know what it's going to look like. All I know is that this view is a lot more promising and a lot more optimistic than the current scientific worldview. It also, to me, has the benefit of making more sense. But that is something people have to judge by themselves.
Well, I think it is the only view in which we are going to, as a species, survive on this planet. I mean, where I get a little hung up is just the massive amounts of people with a world that seems like if we keep moving in this direction, it's not going to be able to support us.
Right. Yes. And I think that sustainability, all these things that we still hear about, and I think sustainability is a big one. I mean, I don't care what worldview you have, that's got to be right at the top of the list. Because unless the world can sustain the people in it, we're never going to survive. And so, what if you look out at the world? We don't have a uniting theme for people. We don't have something except for maybe the law of gravity. We don't have a law. We don't,
the cost of a Starbucks latte.
Yeah,
they're really important things.
And one of the things, I have not traveled the world, but I think I get the idea that most people are the same. They want something to eat. They want a roof over their heads. They want a family, something productive to do, and peace. And somehow we have screwed it all up, where we're fighting over issues that are departing from what we all want. And I think that's because we have forgotten, and this is me being a little on the, how can I put this, on the religious side, but we've forgotten that what joins us is much deeper than what divides us. This is, to me, the big problem. We have forgotten that we are the product of a miracle. Whether it's a Big Bang. You see, this is another thing with the Big Bang. The Big Bang makes you sort of look at the world like short shrift, like, oh, it was just a random creation. These things happen once in a while, and that's what our scientists say. But I'm saying I don't care whether it's a Big Bang or a dream of God. It's an amazing miracle, and we have not appreciated it, and we have to stand back in awe and show appreciation for being here. And that, I think, is what religions are about. You know, even the Quran says something like, God gives humankind great gifts, but most don't show gratitude. There's a line like that, and it's a really good way to put it. God provides great things to humankind, but most don't show any appreciation. And that's really, we're so busy fighting or praying to images that we've forgotten the underlying unity, the underlying power and miracle. So there's a lot here, but again, I go back to my evolution point, which is that I think over time, and if you look, Rita, the last 20, 30 years, there has been a consciousness raising. The 60s and the New Age movement and new spirituality, the stuff you're doing, the energy movement, the paranormal, the psychic phenomena, there is a rising consciousness going on. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I don't know what you think about that. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I do. I think that, you were saying earlier, you get the stuff into the schools so that young people learn. And growing up, there was the beginnings of influences of Eastern traditions in America. And so I don't want to say I was brought up on it, but I was exposed to it. So it wasn't scary and foreign to me. And now young people are being brought up watching Ghost Hunter and Ancient Aliens and all of these shows. And so it's not taboo anymore. But we have a question from Bill in New York. And his comment, I believe in the existence of alien life. How would religious groups embrace these entities if disclosure or contact occurred?
I don't really know. I think ultimately it comes down to how is alien life inconsistent with anything? How is it inconsistent with the Bible? How is it inconsistent with the current scientific paradigm? Or how is it inconsistent with something I'm saying? I mean, I don't think it's inconsistent. I mean, I think that there is, from the scientific standpoint, there's the issue of the closest star other than the sun is Alpha Centauri, which is like 4 light years away. So that's 4 light years. It takes light 4 years to get here. So to imagine that there was a planet around that star, it would take aliens from that planet quite a long time to get to Earth. Okay, that's a scientific standpoint. My view, where I'm looking at the world as mind created, is a little more, I think, sympathetic to alien life because you don't have the same restrictions. But I just don't think that I just don't think alien life is inconsistent with any of this. I mean, I'm open-minded about it. I frankly think we need to really focus our attention on improving our own planet first. But I do think that it's exciting and in a field of inquiry to look to the stars. So it's another really cool area, but it's something I think you got to be open-minded about.
Cool.
Cool.
If we are able to control and create our world, does that mean that we as individuals have to take responsibility for the world we're creating?
Exactly. You see, we have created the world right now. When you look out your window, and this is the world that we have created as jointly together. When you look outside, it's not all bad. I mean, most people are good. It's not all bad, but if you look at this amount of civil wars and crimes and evil acts, clearly there's a lot of progress. But the point, and this goes to your use of responsibility. We are at the controls. This is a manually operated world. This is my opinion. This is not on autopilot. We think it's on autopilot, and therefore we're not responsible. I mean, one of the things, and global warming is an issue, but you could even view it as people that like to litter. They think that somebody else is going to pick it up, that it's not their world. And the same thing for people who damage their own bodies. You are responsible, in my opinion, whether you think you are or not. So when you act as if you're not responsible, that is the default way of looking at things, and you wind up paying the consequences. I think our world itself shows that we don't think we're responsible for the world, or for other people, or for public welfare. Now, there is exceptions, and I think there's so many good people in the world, and I do think things are moving in the right direction. But overall, we are in the story that we are writing, and I'm saying we need to write a better story and have a happy ending, as opposed to this sort of culture of fear without direction that we're engaged in right now.
Yeah, and if we could just get rid of all the politicians, I think if we got rid of all of the politicians and all of the corporations, that people really would live in peace. I think people want to be happy. I think people want to get along. And there's just so much other stuff going on. Get rid of the religions. They're a big one. That, if we got rid of all of this stuff that was putting us in little boxes, that we would get along with each other. You go to Thanksgiving dinner, and the one thing you're not supposed to talk about, politics and religion. Because if you don't talk about those kinds of things, then everybody gets along.
Yeah, that is something else. Well, it's one thing to talk about, say, politics, but it's another thing to treat it as if that is the ultimate, principle, or that's the ultimate defining rule for you. To me, it's close to small talk, and so you can still have politics, but you've got to treat it with a little bit more fun and a little more loosely. You're exactly right. There is so much division going on, where everyone's looking out for themselves. I mean, it's amazing to me that I think the Democrats and Republicans, if one of them would say black, the other would say white, yes, no, they don't even think about what the right answer is. It's all about polarization, and so that's a whole nother topic, but it's all related to the same thing, which is that we don't have a unifying theme. It'd be nice if one theme would be there shall be no homeless people in the U.S. Now that's exactly what's wrong with that one. There shall be nobody who is starving in the United States. Why can't we have that being a theme? Why is that a political issue? But Rita, you're right. It becomes a political issue somehow.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
So we have
because it comes up with money, and who's going to pay for it? And
right. Right. And so we have a long way to go, and this is why, I have to think that this is a natural evolution, a natural change. Though many of us are trying to accelerate the change, and that's what I'm about. That's why I wrote the book, The Collapse of Materialism. I'm trying to accelerate it. I'm not the only one. There's many, many people doing similar things. But ultimately, it's going to have to be something where people wake up, a critical mass wakes up and says, hey, there is a better way. Let's make the change real. And I don't know when it's going to happen. Hopefully it's going to happen in my lifetime. That's why I'm rushing to do this stuff. But I hope that this is where things go. It's going to have to come from the ground up. This is why I'm pretty deep, and the book is deep, because I think it's got to come from the soul upward, the bottom up, because you can't, force people to believe things. You have to make them think it through themselves, and hopefully they come to the same conclusion. So, again, I'm optimistic that this is heading in that direction, that we are going to see a paradigm shift, and that the walls of materialism will someday come crumbling down.
Yay!
So, yay!
So we have a couple of minutes left. Your book, if somebody wants to get a copy so that they can, because we barely touched the surface of your... All right, actually, I'm going to look at a page count in here, because it's a pretty hefty book.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of endnotes. It's about 300 pages. Yeah, it's about 300
pages. 300 pages. Well, lately, the paradigm changes. I've been seeing these books that are like 120 pages. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that is the thing. Now, the advantage of my book, and it is available on Amazon. My website is thecollapseofmaterialism.com. It's also available in Barnes & Noble and some bookstores around. I'm not sure which ones, but it's out there. Obviously, Amazon's a good place to go. But the book is what it is, because it's one-stop shopping. It's like you don't have to read a lot of different books to get the idea. I try to put it all here. In other words, I put together philosophy, the paranormal, then cosmology, Darwinianism, and a little bit on religion, and then it's got a happy ending. And so those who want a different perspective, the book tries to do it as fast as possible. But what I'm trying to say is compare my book, pick up Stephen Hawking, pick up Richard Dawkins, read a couple of their books, Lawrence Krauss, and then compare it to the arguments in my book, and at least you'll have the other side of the argument, and people can make up their mind. So it's a lot of fun, and we're lucky to be, just like we started off, we're lucky to be in a place where new ideas and alternative ways of thinking can be promoted and advanced, and I could be on this show and we could talk about this stuff. So it's cool.
Yeah, cool. One last quick thing, your radio show, when is it? What's the name of it, and how can people listen to it?
Okay, so my radio show is called Conversations Beyond Science and Religion, and it's available on webtalkradio.net and also iTunes. A new show is broadcast every Monday. It is a podcast, and I have guests from Dr. Rita Louise to Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton and Amika Swami and Paul Steinhardt. I have the leaders in this field, including a lot of scientists, talking about things like epigenetics and cosmology, all the things I've been talking about. And the purpose of the show is to go beyond science and religion and open minds and try to break through some of these mental barriers that we grow up with. So I have a lot of fun with it, and the more people I talk to, the more I see that we are heading in the right direction, and it really is a lot of fun. So,
all right. Well, they told me the music's rolling, so we need to go.
Okay.
So thanks, Philip. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Rita. It was a...
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.